谢谢您的介绍。我今天的报告还是会用英文来讲，但是我先用中文自我介绍一下，我叫侯雨萌，我的专业呢，我主要是从事数字人文研究。OK， 我是从事数字人文研究的学者。我刚刚在瑞士联邦理工的这个实验博物馆学做完我有关这个数字博物馆学、数字档案的 PhD 博士，然后马上要去香港去继续任教，然后继续这个我今天所讲的有关武术文化的数字化保护和计算保护的研究。所以今天很开心来到这里，也很开心，很感谢会议可以邀请我来演讲，来讲我的这块工作。那接下来我会切换到英文模式去讲我的报告。中文的翻译我们可以在耳机里面听到。Okay, so I just said thank you for having me for this presentation. I'm super It's quite a pleasure for me to be here today to talk about my research. As I just introduced, I just completed my PhD in digital humanities, which investigates the application of computational thinking and computational tools, and how can these thinking and tools enhance the knowledge representation and systematic operation of intangible and embodied knowledge as in martial arts, and while at the same time preserving the sense of humanity's understanding of these practices as much as possible. And therefore, my approach to martial arts is interdisciplinary and somehow experimental. And to provide an illustration of my research, my presentation today will address how I use digital and computational tools to model and represent embodied knowledge in Southern Chinese martial arts. So a premise of this research is that we view martial arts from an intangible cultural heritage perspective and attempt to bridge the gaps between human expert understanding and data science instruments with the purpose of knowledge organization and communication. So such research is situated in the context that although today there has been a huge advancement in digital practices that aims to safeguard cultural heritage, particularly through recording and archiving the entities of our humanities or mankind's collective memories, there remains a gap in models and tools that can readily apply to intangible cultural heritage or assayage materials. So unlike physical objects or heritage sites that are defined by material values, assayage is defined by tacit and nuanced practices, often embodied and socially transmitted. And taking martial arts as an example, here the body that practices and sometimes performs martial arts serves as an archive that embodies a multi-layered repertoire of the aesthetics, kinematics, ideologies, and expertise. And they also embody the traits of historical and cultural interplays. Well, simultaneously, the body also acts beyond the storage or beyond the archive itself. It also acts as the activation of the knowledge being archived. So the process of embodied knowledge from being archived to being transferred and eventually enacted constitutes a pathway for knowledge transmission. And I'd like to look into this pathway and study on how to enhance the transmission process of martial arts, of intangible embodied knowledge like martial arts. As a foundation, the Hong Kong Martial Arts Living Archive has addressed the primary challenges that associate with the body as the archive. So Hong Kong Mala has been a longitudinal collaboration since 2012. It was co-founded by Mr. Heng Chao, representing the International Goshu Association, and Professor Sarah Kandadan, who represented City University of Hong Kong at that time, and now EPFL EM+. And this archive has also involved and attracted many more researchers and scholars to be involved in the project. So the archive responds to the contemporary challenges for preserving and transmitting martial arts. It does so chiefly through examining a live archiving strategy that integrates the state-of-the-art motion capture and recording tools on top of scrutinized reenactment from historical manuscripts. And so far, the archive has captured over 100 sets of Taolu performances, or known as forms, and hundreds of short video demonstrations of fundamental techniques, and the archival content represents over 20 styles and the practices of more than 30 elite masters. The archive has also collated rich documentation of cultural practices such as rituals, festive events, craft skills, and line dance, like this kind of dance performances. Altogether, it constitutes a whole of environment presentation of the martial tradition. However, although Hong Kong Mala holds great potential for transmitting martial knowledge, this potential can be further unlocked. A primary indicator, a primary factor of this archive, somehow kind of restricts the knowledge transmission today, is that the archive has been organized primarily based on manually curated catalogs that reflect its exhibition history. So access to the archive was restricted to the level of data files and reliant on prior knowledge about the entire archive and also the history of the archive, and with limited relational connections between data segmentations and files. So in order to unlock the archive's potential for knowledge transmission, we argue that these issues about data complexity, data access, and the capacity for knowledge description should be addressed so as to facilitate the archive's data usage and further the representational capabilities. To tackle this aim, we decomposed this mission into three research questions. And first, how should embodied knowledge in martial arts be comprehended and interpreted? And which aspects should be highlighted to convey the knowledge? And second, how can computational thinking be applied to reorganize and reconstruct martial arts knowledge in a way that is meaningful to human understanding and also operable by machine intelligence? And on that basis, how can computational tools be used to encode or process informational aspects of the multimodal data in the archive so as to convert them into effective knowledge representations? And then we're curious about what insights can such representations provide. So the first research question gathered the rationale of this research. Only after we identify the epistemic components of martial arts can we develop effective encoding paradigm that may help with transmission. So at the very beginning, the beginning chapter of this research, I worked to deconstruct martial knowledge, first based on literature studies and theoretical analysis. So two major theories were consulted here. First, martial arts is as embodied knowledge, and then the oneness model that reflects traditional Chinese philosophy. And according to Husserl, the notion of embodiment entails the body being at the center of life experiences. It mediates the practices that extend beyond physical skills, but toward a multi-layered composition of 5 epistemic dimensions. And this perspective resonates with the traditional Chinese way of knowing, which integrates Tao, Fa, and Shu into a harmonious oneness model. Here, due to the time limitation, I won't elaborate on these theories, but a very detailed discussion about the Tao, Fa, Shu is provided, has been discussed by Professor Ma Mingdai in his publication and also a book, so that if you have interest in consult further, you can refer to his publications. So, I just talk about theoretical analysis that paves the foundation of this research. but theoretical discourses only represent the essence of historical interpretations of martial epistemology, and contemporary understandings of the knowledge practice is yet to be understood. So to this end, to understand how the knowledge is interpreted and transmitted today, I carried out a 6-month of fieldwork research in Hong Kong and also Lingnan region through 2 trips to understand how this practice is being trained and is being practiced and taught today. So during the field studies, I trained myself martial arts. I didn't practice martial arts before this research, but I trained myself martial arts during this field work to better understand the knowledge. And I followed both traditional and modernized formal curricula to have a better understanding of the differences and particularly commonalities between the 2 curriculums. And in addition, and also interviewed 12 masters and advanced practitioners, all possessing from 15 to 50 years of experiences in practicing traditional styles. Through the interviews, I collected their voices on martial epistemology in different perspectives. So basically, I explored their backgrounds, the interviewees' backgrounds in exercising and teaching martial arts, their perspectives on the aspects of, different aspects of the knowledge, as well as their opinions on how, whether it is good or not by using digital tools to learn or teach martial arts. So here, in a super brief highlight of the key points that I collected through the interviews, which are crucial to my encoding rationale. First, through the interviews, I understood that all interviewees acknowledge the importance of theoretical teaching and learning in martial arts, as it provides an expert view when executing a movement. However, they also emphasize that theoretical learning is effective only with the combination of practical training. And to this end, Tao Lu is recognized as an important tool for practical training, especially effective for beginners and intermediates. And whereas 2-person training and sparring were also advocated as a way to cultivate the sense of applications, but at a more advanced level. And regarding teaching, digital teaching and learning, acknowledge the benefit of digital tools, its ability to document knowledge and aid memory. While other creative ideas such as virtual fighting and AI generation for movement creations were also mentioned. So based on these interviews, we summarized that the primary objective of this encoding effort should be to represent martial knowledge akin to provide instructions by masters in the real world. So the aspects to be encoded are thus distilled as such. So first, we should take care of the representations of the conceptual elements that contribute to theoretical learning, but also technical learning. And we also need to represent the concepts or entities that can inform the mind-body association, probably via the principles that guide body manipulations in martial practices. So with these principles in mind, the wish to encode these 3 layers led us to the second research question, which tackles the application of computational thinking to conceptualize or to reorganize martial arts. To this end, the advancement of semantic web, particularly ontologies and linked open data, has introduced new possibilities. So ontology, which is originally a study, it's a philosophical study, a branch of philosophical studies. It denotes the study of being and existence. So this philosophical methodology has been adopted by information science or computer scientists as a formal representation approach to define. It is used to kind of formally define a subject area by defining a set of terms and how they are related, such that we can represent conceptual entities via a relational network of many others. So such a network-like methodology has been widely used in curating and making sense of cultural heritage data. However, existing the current ontologies have been primarily focused on capturing material qualities, such as heritage sites, the material of the site, the location of the site, those kind of static characteristics, whereas the modeling of intangible and embodied aspects has been really under-addressed. The conceptual realm of martial arts is exceptionally complex. There are at least physical characteristics of body techniques and theoretical components that guide the technical applications. There are also symbols, objects, norms, people, and social agents that play a role in the knowledge transmission. And furthermore, the interpretation of a single concept can vary in context. For instance, a taolu, when used for practical training, it can be identified and understood as a technical concept or technical entity. However, when the same movement are performed at village festivals, they take on the meaning of performance. So to develop an ontology that being able to describe such a complex dynamic conceptual realm, we examined 8 competency questions that the ontology must be able to answer. Following, in the design methodology, we follow the purpose of being able to describe or answer those 8 questions, and such that we develop such an ontology of martial arts that consists of the technical module, stylistic module, and social module, with classes and relations that can constitute a kind of comprehensive conceptualization of the martial concepts. So the model, using this model as a basis, we now progress to address the third research question, which is to apply computational tools to enhance knowledge representation, and we also call it as datafication. So here I'd like to quote Bogman's question, from what are data to when are data? A recording of martial arts, when watched merely as a video performance, it is not treated as data. However, it becomes data after being processed as an informational content, and more so when transformed into operable units. So this transformation of digital or non-digital recording or objects about martial arts into operable units and informational units defines my objective of datafication. And in practice, we selected a set of martial manuals and books fundamental to the learning of 3 archetypal styles in Southern Chinese martial arts. These are White Crane boxing, Hun Queen, and Charlie Fu. To my own understanding, they each represent short and middle and long-range combat, so that we can grasp a brief idea of the essence of the regional systems. And then we then transcribe the terminology and descriptions from books into ontological annotations using the martial arts ontology model, and then we created a set of essential corpus, and we annotated those corpus into ontological data formats using an annotation tool called Protégé. And finally, through these steps, we identified the conceptual knowledge from books and videos into RDF datasets and further connected them to media segments in the Hong Kong Mala. So the data and the documentation of the model has been published online for reapplication and open usage. If you feel interested, you can write to me later and to find it. So here, I just want to briefly show how this kind of datafication can be applied for knowledge transmission. So based on these data sets, we can develop or implement a graph database that can convert the knowledge in the books to really structured knowledge graphs. And then using this graph, you can write database language to query different concepts, and you can also let the machine to infer or find relations between different concepts to give you a kind of an indication of the relations between different entities in martial arts. And in our experiment, we also leverage this kind of relational schema and build a data, like a knowledge graph about Kung Fu masters. But this knowledge graph only serves as an experiment because we use the data source from open link data like Wikipedia and Baidu Baike, and we use these kind of data sources to try to build relations between masters and styles, and we wanted to use it to analyze the relational schema that probably help us to perform lineage analysis between the masters and styles. It works in a way. However, based on this work, we found that this kind of methodology is effective, but the sources are not. So in this regard, because you can see like it can perform lineage analysis, but the data is not reliable because it's only the open data that people annotated online. So in this regard, we were thinking about like the next stage of this is to combine different manuscripts and different documents that are really reliable. We can use like OCR to extract the named entities of the people, the masters, and also the styles and the events that they were performed in, and then try to, on this basis, to develop a more reliable knowledge system that can be used for culture analytics in the context of martial arts. I don't have time to talk about the others, but just very briefly, we also used machine learning and deep learning to analyze the martial. We also try to identify the performances of martial arts based on the motion features, such that you can search similar movements between different videos and mocap data, and you can just search for like similar moves, like segments of similar moves, that only based on body features. And then we wanted to connect this kind of similarity computation with the semantics of martial arts so that we can try to find some relational patterns between different styles and different taolu, which beyond the already known understanding of the relations between the styles and the lineages. And we also, based on this kind of data sets and data structure, we already did some preliminary evaluation. Basically, we developed a web-based system that combined all those knowledge graphs, concepts, and video demonstrations. And we tested with 18 Swiss people, which are people which are students and staff who doesn't possess any experience in martial arts, and also half of them didn't read Chinese, they could not read Chinese at all. We asked them to just play with this system for 30 minutes, and then we asked them to finish a quiz to answer some questions about martial arts. And quite surprisingly, they did most of the quizzes correctly, and they also feel like the experience is quite friendly, inviting, so they want to, and also motivating, so that they wanted to continue learning martial arts after playing with the system, even though they probably didn't want to before that. So we wanted to carry on this research as well. We noticed a lot of limitations in this system, like the translation problem in concepts, and also the visual communication can be more effective and related to martial arts. The perceptive ways of martial arts, and we really, as we aim to continue this research and also to evolve this database and system, we really invite your collaboration in the future steps. And yeah, so please feel free to write to me if you feel like you have more questions or you want to know further about this research, and especially if you want to get involved in building the data set and annotating the concepts and also building the knowledge systems. Thank you for your attention.
I'm Jacopo Penso, member of Opera Nova School in Italy, the school founded by Roberto Gotti. I'm speaking to you from Martial Art Museum and the Garetings Study Center in Brescia. the official center of the Italian Fencing Federation for research on historical fencing and European martial art. My warmest thanks to Mr. Ing Chao for his kind invitation. It is a pleasure to take part in this year's conference, even if not in person. With this small contribution, I'd like to talk about a martial practice of the past, a training game rediscovered through the analysis of several depictions and some written sources. A research paper in collaboration with Professor Maud Perez-Simon from La Sorbonne Nouvelle University in Paris is in publication regarding this work. In the last 3 decades, the martial gesture of European tradition has been subject of investigation and restoration. The main sources of this rediscovery have been fight books and treatises made by master-at-arms, especially from Renaissance time. However, we have always considered it necessary to keep an interdisciplinary approach, embracing diversified sources of information. Archaeological, metallurgical, artistic, and literary studies have played a crucial role in keeping a wide understanding of martial phenomena. Old masters we study were in close connection to artists, intellectuals, leaders of their time. Often, they themselves were eclectic figures with several professions, talents, and skills. Martial art was the expression of a socio-cultural environment, influenced by social norms, tools, and contexts of application. It was widespread and commonly known, and as a consequence, subject of re-elaboration by social products, source of inspiration for cultural, technological, and artistic production. This is the perspective we can use to frame the study of the Gioco del Civettino, in English, Howl Game, as a brilliant example of interdisciplinary dialogue. Until the half of the 16th century, martial games and training prepared the body and mind of young people for combat. Martial art was widespread and practiced, and could not be limited to a specific and selective exercise, so its learning was not sanctioned by a specific time, age, or place. The complexity and variety of application, from war to duel, created individual and social need to have trained bodies starting at an early age and involving not just an elite of warriors, but a large part of the population. This is the origin of practice of physical confrontation with ritualized and educational violence used inside urban context, with a mixture of recreational, sports, and martial purposes. Examples of these are the Gioco del Ponte, the bridge game, in Pisa, La Guerra dei Pugni, the War of the Fists, in Venice, or similar mass boxing practice in the city of Gubbio. From the chronicles we know, the episodes of violent degeneration were not rare, in which boundaries between feast, game, and brawl were crossed. Other references to martial art education derive from the revival of the classical era. An example is Antonio Cornazzano de Re Militari, which, citing Vegezius' work, wrote about the training on the wooden pole, considering it an educational tool for young people, with not only physical but also moral value, and considering the military predominance of the Roman people in antiquity to be the result of this widespread practice among his youth. A common training exercise was unarmed wrestling, a discipline widely practiced, of which we may find many representations. Wrestling could be expressed in different ways, ranging from recreational practice to training, to competitive fights, up to self-defense and application in real combat. It was practiced for educational purposes and learned as an integral part of armed combat to manage close-measure situations or to defend from unexpected aggressions like in Marozzo lessons. Master Pietromonte considered wrestling a fundamental physical exercise, necessary before learning armed discipline. In the Courtier by Baldassare Castiglione, 1528, wrestling is cited as a playful activity practiced by young nobles together with villani, common people, demonstrating a transversality between social classes, all in the presence of the public, which enjoyed the competition. Multiple natures of wrestling emerged from the study of the anonymous Italian manuscript from 16th century called Postura, now preserved in the collection of the Martial Art Museum. For example, the same takedown technique is depicted in a double way, One, with two unarmed fighters practicing on a mat, and on the second time, with two opponents armed with swords in a fencing context. Precious testimonies of martial cultures and games related to training emerge from the study of figurative production. Although in this case there is no real didactic intent in the source, these representations are precious photographs, snapshots, pictures that immortalize moments of daily life, from which we can reconstruct lost practice and recover aspects sometimes overlooked or less understandable from bibliographic sources. An example of these are the ceiling tablets with two players maneuvering a long stick, each at one of the two hands, playful preparation for the use of polearms. Or the other one with the two players sitting on the ground, their legs extended in front of them, with the feet in contact, and the hands firmly holding the same stick, a test of strength, technique, and cunning, part of the traditional heritage of many cultures between North Europe and Asia, and today widespread internationally under the name of mass wrestling. Or again, the fresco of the Broletto in Novara, the communal assembly square, which shows a fight with sticks and a large basket to protect the head, next to a scene of wrestling. Among these martial games is the object of our research, the Civettino game. The first representation of the game we encountered was that of the birthing plate of Palazzo Davanzati in Florence, followed by that of the frescoes of the Volta Pinta of the Loggia in the town hall of Assisi. From the study of the images, a first reconstruction of the game was born, combining the representation of the game with the martial art training experience from Opera Nova School. With big surprise, and thanks to the collaboration with Professor Maud Perez-Simon, many other sources, both pictorial and textual, have been discovered. The last lucky find has been the frescoes on the Gonzaga family palace in Mantova. The Civettino game is played with 3 participants arranged on a line at the same distance, with a central player with legs apart and 2 lateral players, also with legs apart, who takes position on either side with foot in contact with the central player. The game consists of exchanging open hands blows while dodging or parrying the opponents. The central player, the protagonist of the game, turning now towards one player, now towards the other, will exchange with him large blows aimed at the face, which can be blocked or avoided. The constant presence of the third player behind will prevent the central player from avoiding blows by fleeing with his head and torso backwards, forcing him to face his opponent and so continuously building protective architectures in front of him. The name of the game may refer to the frequent use of the term far civetta in Italian, to mean the act of dodging a blow, especially by suddenly moving the head like the animal, the howl. On the other hand, we also find the terminology of toccare a civetta, to touch or tap at all, to the meaning of hitting, a terminology that could even arise from the game itself. In Treccani dictionary, it is mentioned the cry of the howl, cuckoo, as made by the central player to alternately call his teammates, or the lateral player waiting for the player in the center if the latter focused for too long on one of the 2 antagonists. The main characteristic of the Civettino seems to be that of the mandatory measure for practitioners, unlike free combat in which movement in space is a fundamental component. In Civettino game, the distance of the feet is fixed, given by the subject legs apart. In some representation, further limited by the overlap of the feet between the central subject and the lateral ones. This fixed distance concentrates all movements on the upper part, involving torso, head, and arms. The game, therefore, trains the ability to defend oneself from a blow, either with an active and propulsive defense of the arms or thanks to a rapid movement of the targeted area. It teaches the cautious attacks and, thanks to practice in 3, the sudden variation in the opponent, developing adaptation, improvisation, and situational reading. Particularly interesting from the point of view of understanding the game and its practice in ancient times was the lucky discovery of the presence of civettino in an opera composed towards the middle of the 17th century, which give us dialogues and jokes that animate pictorial representations. This is the Il Paride by Giovanni Andrea Angelini Bontempi, performed for the first time in Dresden in 1662. In the third act, third scene, three auntie children dedicate themselves to the game of the civettino in a clearing in the woods, interrupted at the end by the arrival of a bear that scares the three young people. The game is called challenge by the three, same terms used usually for the duel, and it's characterized by continuously negotiation, disputes on the position of the players if they are too far, or on the strength of the blows, or on the responsibility for the error, by warnings, by invitation to caution, by threats, jokes, and mottos. This scene can represent, although forced by the theatrical necessity, a good picture of the not very regulated nature of the game, and of its important component of challenge and playful activity, in which the part of sociality and verbal exchange is as important as the gestural one. Let's now see some variations and possible rules in the civettino game. In numerous pictorial representations, the player in the center is shown with his hands palms together. This may suggest a starting position for the central player, which makes it more difficult to particularly block opponent's arms with his, or even preventing him from doing so, forcing him to limiting himself in dodging at the attacks. In this way, connecting the etymology of suddenly moving the head to avoid a blow, of which we may have several examples in literature. On the other hand, the forced position can also serve to slow down the dynamics of the game, forcing a return to the position collected before each attack and each parry, in order to avoid an exchange of disorderly blows and educate concentration on a single and sudden gestures, much more similar to the precise and concentrated strike of a real battle. The lateral players, on the other hand, are practically always represented with one arm close to the face to protect, and the other one extended, with the center of gravity moved backwards to stay away from the central player as possible. However, the representation of the legs apart and the feet overlapping is not uniform, suggesting the spread of a variant with freer position of the player. In Nicoletto da Modena's print, the three participants of the game are not so linked, but the putto on the center seems also to be leaning against the tree in the center, therefore still giving the idea of a fixed position, at least for the central player. In later representation, one of the most modern we have, we even find a fourth participant in the game, who lies on his back between the legs of the central player and holds one leg of each lateral player with his arms. Furthermore, this representation places the games in a scene with several characters, with a public present in a bucolic context of fun among a group of young people. In the most recent written description of the game, references is made to the objective of dropping or grabbing the hat of the player in the center, suggesting a less physical and dangerous version of the game. Considering the absence of the headdress in the players of the most archaic representations, we can hypothesize an evolution of the game which over time has lost a connotation of combat training. On the other hand, this did not make civettino less demanding or completely deprived of the martial component, as we can see from the notes to Malmantile, where he speaks of beatings of the two lateral players to remove the headgear of the one in the center, and the big slaps of him to defend himself. A more refined version, such as the description of the Grande Dizionario della Lingua Italiana, Big Dictionary of Italian Language, allows us to imagine a modern version without any more strikes, but only with the grip of the cap. A transformation similar, we may say parallel, to the path of fencing, which from a necessary practice for the preparation of the warrior has progressively transformed into a sport game. The combat exercise with fixed measures that characterize the civettino is part of an ancient and widespread tradition of which we find numerous forms and representations. We have already mentioned the possibility that during the battle and the combat with cold weapons, one could move from a wide measure to the so-called gioco stretto, the tight, narrow game, and then end up grappling with vast repertories of disarms, joint locks, and throwings. In these cases, the proximity and contact with the opponent are controlled by at least one of the two opponents, and there remains the possibility of dissolving the measure to move apart, moving away from the other's body. However, numerous traditions have existed of binding one or both actors to a portion of space or to contact with the other's body, preventing free and independent management of the measure. Among the most archaic representations, thanks to Professor Ausilio Priuli, we find the rock carvings of Valle Camonica, which depict two boxers with 1 foot each in the square in the center, an example of ritualized fight within a narrow space. Another example of ancient origin is the tradition of the belt fight, in which the two contenders grab each other by the waist belt. We find references to it in the Epic of Gilgamesh, and it is documented in a find dated to 26 centuries before Christ, a bronze statuette with two wrestlers who, accordingly to some interpretation, are also balancing a jar on their head. This tradition is widely spread among the peoples of Central Asia and appears in the traditions of the nomads in Mongolia. It is still practiced today, also with an international sport federation founded in 2005. In Europe, we can find interesting iconographies from the 13th century in which two wrestlers are always shown bare-chested. A possible trace of this tradition can be found in the aforementioned manuscript Postura, where among the teachings appears a starting position in which the two fighters start having both grabbed the opponent's body, evidence of a sedimentation of this practice. Subsequently forgotten or neglected, this custom reappeared in the second half of the 19th century, imported from Russia and widespread as Russian-Swiss wrestling, in which the two wrestlers wore a special sturdy belt with handles. A variant of the belt fight that appears in English iconography of the 14th century shows two opponents holding each other by a fabric lace or tissue around the neck. The same is also illustrated in a later manuscript of the German area. Inside European martial art treatises, we find the fight in the hall wrestling, practiced in the German area. This was a game training in which one of the two fighters suffered from the handicap of having to keep 1 foot fixed on the ground, while the other must stand on 1 foot. The fixed measure did not only characterize forms of unarmed combat of a more or less playful nature, but also appears in the context of duel. The Nordic tradition of the holmgang was a ritual duel and involved fighting with swords and shields within a narrow space, delimited by a cloak or an animal skin fixed on the ground. The Icelandic saga of Cormac, before the 13th century, reports the rules of the holmgang. Sometimes in medieval times, we also find unusual duels in which the delimitation of mobility applies only to one of the two. These are the duels between man and woman, in which, in addition to the difference of weapons, the man is placed in a hole in the ground or in a barrel to prevent the movement of the legs in order to equalize the fight. In recent times, we find in the Italian popular tradition the duelli alla caprara, duels of the goat shepherds, violent clashes between opponents armed with knife and with their left arms tied each other, whose origins are traced back to the duels between shepherds from the region of Abruzzo, and then reported in the news among the most brutal customs, also widespread among the famous Roman bullies between the 19th and 20th century. A similar method of dueling with a knife and a tied arm or wrist was also widespread overseas in North America, with the so-called Helena duel, which owes its name to the Texan city of Helena, mentioned by the 1950 guide published by the Texas State Highway Commission. This type of clash has fascinating authors and artists, being reported in fictional works such as Leslie Scott's Western novel, or in the Far West film The Duel of 2016, and even appears in the choreography of the music video of the pop song. Outside of the regulated context that we have taken into consideration here, we cannot forget the heterogeneity and unpredictability of the war context. The engraving of Pollaiolo, Battle of the Naked Men, places two fighters grabbing the same chain right in the center. Putting aside the symbolic meaning and the artistic characterization of the composition, the scene represents elements of notable realism of gesture and weapon. In conclusions, different fields of knowledge become an opportunity for in-depth studies between apparently distant disciplinary sectors, with mutual benefit. Our understanding of the martial art is enriched by studies ranging from the metallographic analysis on original pieces, from archaeological studies on rock engravings, from studies of artistic and pictorial representation. The now developed sensitivity to the martial gesture and its dynamics is today an important interpretative support in such study contexts as art history, giving precious hints in the interpretation of martial sources. Thank you for your attention. I hope it was interesting for you. And in case you have any question or suggestion, please feel free to contact me.
Okay, let us thank Dr. Penzo.
上战我之前已经打过了啊，就是刚柔脆。现在呢，我们打咏春白鹤拳，另外一套拳叫12节力，都是李干师傅教给我的啊。现在我现场表演给大家看，好吧 ？12节力呢，就综合很多白鹤的一些动作在一套拳里边，所以它的观赏性比较大。还有就是我因为台的问题，所以我会横着来打，就是从侧边这个方向看，大家会看得比较清楚一点。
他们先移，你再打。
可以移吗？这个？
可以，他们要移，因为有3个标。
哦，对，
谢谢。
测一下，好不好？
对。Shanzhan is a famous training method of Fujin Nanqing. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Luo. 感谢罗先生。下一位 ，next demo we have Mr. Yao Qiu Huang performing Dragon Form. 我们有黄耀球先生帮我们表演龙行中正，谢谢，欢迎。Thank you, Mr. 黄，谢谢黄耀球先生。再下来，我们也有罗先生在为我们表演鹤羽双刀。We will have Albert Liu again performing crane wing double swords for us. Thank you.谢谢罗先生 ，Thank you, Mr. Luo。谢谢。Thank you all for coming today and enjoying the 3 demos that we have, the wonderful demos that we have. 谢谢大家今天来临。我们有多一个 ，we have an extra. We have an extra demo. It's a special for everybody. We have Mr. Wang here. He will be demonstrating Sanzan for us. Thank you, Mr. Wang. 谢谢王先生。Guess what? We actually have an extra performance. 凤凰出动。陈先生，陈柏翰先生会为我们表演。We have an extra performance by Mr. Chang, Phoenix Rising. Thank you, Mr. Chen. 谢谢陈先生。